All right. I believe we are live. I can't see all of you, so I'm going to go on a leap of faith here. And first of all, express my apologies for being late. This is kind of the way things work in Washington. We had a vote tonight. It was supposed to be at 6:45 our time. I thought I had plenty of time to get back. And of course, it wasn't until about 7. So a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, my thanks to all of you for your willingness to be flexible on us as we experiment with formats, try the best way to be accessible to you. This is a little unique. We've never done it quite this way. We've done pieces of this before, but we've never done it quite this way before. So we're all learning together. I'll make you a commitment that I'll keep experimenting with different formats, and I think each situation is a little different. We'll try to find formats that work for all of you, and we'll try to do more of these as well. I want to just point out a couple of things before we jump in. The reason that we are experimenting with a different format is the reality of it is I'm just not in Utah very much. Since January 6th, when I was sworn in, we had 1 week back in the district, and we in that week we hopped in our car and drove down to parts of the state that hadn't seen me for a very, very long time. We have what I would affectionately call a week-long town hall meeting with elected officials and students, and quite frankly, even protesters through that. And realizing it's also going to be a while before I'm back in the state. That's why we've jumped to this format. I want to point out there's a lot of responsibilities of a senator, and one that doesn't get a lot of attention is the team that I have. And this team does what we call casework, and that's helping people with passports, helping people with visas, their Social Security or their VA. And at the end of the video tonight, we'll share a link with you so that if you do have those questions for my team, you can access them. I'm just going to brag a little bit. This is the same team that was with me in the House, where we were rated the #1 constituent outreach in the country. So if you do have issues, our team's anxious to help with any of those that you come across. I just also want to point out there is one more vote tonight, and it's a little unpredictable on the timing. If that runs into any of you with the 5-minute meetings, we will figure it out. We will get you your time. You might need to be a little patient for a couple of you that might get disturbed because of that. But even if I have to call you personally, we will make sure we get the time that we promised all of you. Okay, looking at my team before we jump in, we're good. I'm going to jump in. What we did is we will have the one-on-one with you. I think we're actually doing that for almost an hour and a half. But we had a glance at your questions and the things that you wrote down. And I want to try, we put those into basically 5 categories. And so for the next few minutes, about 20-ish minutes, I want to try to address those. I'm happy to readdress them in the one-on-ones, but the more effective I am in addressing them right now, the less that you'll need to focus on those, and you'll be able to ask me perhaps other things on your mind. So in no particular order. Also, I just looked at my notes. I do want to share one thing before I jump into the questions. Yesterday was a historic moment in Washington, D.C., and most of the world missed it, and most of the press missed it. And even reading in local press, I think they kind of missed what happened yesterday. So I want to share with you what it was. So you may have read that Cory Booker, Senator Booker from New Jersey, did a filibuster. It is the longest one in Senate history, a little over 24 hours. And that was kind of what the news cycle picked up. What they didn't really talk about much, which I think was actually very cool, is it was on the anniversary of the filibuster of Storm Thurmond, and it was Storm Thurmond's record he beat. This is the significant thing. Storm Thurmond was filibustering against civil rights. So to have Cory Booker, a Black man, beat the filibuster on the anniversary, that was the story. And I'm sorry the press kind of missed that in my mind. I really wanted to show that. And then if you read a little bit about it, you know that I had the real honor of presiding several times during the 24 hours and at the end of the 24 hours when he beat the record. And he and I had met before. We knew each other kind of casually. And I just felt kind of prompted to go leave him a note. So while he was speaking, I kind of snuck up and put a note on his desk. And he found that, I would say, in his words, touching. And then he alluded to it a number of times in the speech. And anyway, I just thought that was a special moment for me and something that he mentioned, and I certainly won't forget as one of my great memories in Washington. Okay, staff just prompted me with another thing I missed. We do want to do a survey. Let me just share with you quickly. You should see on your screens now. We want to know what the most important question is to you: national security, economy, inflation, healthcare, or DOGE. And we'll compile those and then share those with you too at the end. All right, let me jump in. I know you really want to get into these questions. I'm going to start with, what I think I saw the very most in the responses from all of you. I hear it a lot, and that is the concentration of power under the executive branch, and specifically what Congress is doing to combat that. And I don't mind telling you, this has been a little bit of a journey for me. It's not immediately evident what Congress should do in this situation, but I've thought a lot about it. And I obviously have been prompted by a lot of you and a lot of people that I talk to do more. And so let me share what my thoughts are. And in our one-on-ones, we can talk more, or you can also communicate with me more if you want more details. I kind of feel like there's what I would call a long-term strategy and a short-term strategy for Congress in dealing with an executive branch that's operating outside, and particularly into the legislative branch's business. And it's my observation that this happens most often when we don't do our job. And that's kind of what invites the executive in, if that makes sense. And let me give you an example. There's no better example than the budget. And I think a lot of the executive orders that you're seeing are dealing with the budget. I don't think that'd be happening if we had done our job. Now, think about this. The current Budget Act that we operate under was put together in 1974. Since 1974, Congress has done its constitutional responsibility with that budget 4 times. We have literally only done our appropriations 4 times since 1974. Senator Grassley, if you know him, he's a little bit older. He's the only one who actually remembers the last time we did it on time. And so that is fundamentally opening the door to the executive branch that we have not done that. So, for instance, when he attacks something that we've appropriated money for, the reality of it is we haven't appropriated money for it. We haven't spoken as a voice for a very, very long time. We've done omnibus bills and continuing resolutions, but that makes us far less effective. And so let me just touch quickly what I'm doing to bring that in and to change that. When I first came here, I felt like my responsibility was to vote against bad spending bills, and I did that for a time. I've since realized I need to do more. I need to fundamentally change the way that we appropriate our money. That is such a foreign concept here because, like I said, we've done that since 1974. I actually have a bill that I'm circulating among my colleagues to fundamentally change the way we would appropriate. It's patterned after the way we do things in Utah, but I've made obviously a number of changes to make it accommodate here. Think how cool this is. If effective, guaranteed, never a shutdown, never a continuing resolution, never an omnibus. The only way money gets spent is the way that we're intended to spend it, through an appropriation. That would give us so much more power with the executive branch if we budget that way. Another category that I think is a really good example is public lands. Now, budgeting is an example of where we've done it poorly. Let me give you an example of where we've actually done our job well, which is kind of checked the executive branch. You all know about Bears Ears, I suspect. You all know about Grand Staircase, but not as many people know about Emery County. And in Emery County, after Bears Ears, we got together and we worked with environmentalists, we worked with off-road enthusiasts, we worked with ranchers, we worked with farmers. Stunningly, we were actually able to reach consensus on how we would use over 1 million acres of public lands. And we put that into law. By putting that into law, it solidifies forever where we recreate, where we graze, where we protect. And an executive branch doesn't have the ability to get around that with Antiquities Act orders.
because we did it through legislatively. So those are two really good examples, one good, one bad, where on the long term, we can reel in what the executive branch is doing. Now, let me also say, I get it. What happens when we haven't done our job decades in the past, like budgeting, and now what we do with today's situation. And I don't think just because we haven't done our job before, it absolves us of our responsibility to be aggressive in making sure that we're legislating and the executive branch is doing their job. We are more limited. We're limited to the bully pulpit. As an example of that, there are times when I feel like, hey, I need to speak out. I'll give you just a real quick example. When we voted, it's been several weeks ago now, I forget exactly when, we voted with Russia and North Korea on a UN resolution against our friends in Ukraine. That was a line too far for me. And so I used my bully pulpit to the best I could to speak out. Now, I would also tell you, I know that many of you feel like I don't do it enough, and I don't want to discount that. I would mention this to you. If I responded to every tweet, to everything, that would be all I did. And one of the stories that I tell people is a good example. In President Trump's first term, I was down in the south part of the state, and we were working on a Navajo Indian reservation road problem, and we were getting a memorandum of understanding with San Juan County. And a tweet came out that everybody was like, why aren't you responding, Representative Curtis? And I had to make a choice that day. I could leave the negotiations, take my team, my chief, my comms guy, and go make a statement, or I could stay there at the table and get that done. And I just want you to know that it is a balance for me, how much time I spend responding and how much time I spend actually doing many of my other responsibilities. I'll be the first to tell you, it's a hard balance, and I don't always get it right, but I want you to know that I strive to make sure that are those critical things that I am making a statement. Okay, I am looking over at my timer. I got to move through these other 5 questions as much as I can. Tariffs. Well, just as we were preparing for this, President Trump announced his new tariffs. I'm going to tell you, I also dealt with this in Trump #1, and my feeling on tariffs is they are very, very problematic, disproportionately hard on small businesses. And when I was interviewing President Trump's nominees that had anything to do with commerce or tariffs, I literally pled with them, and I said, if you do tariffs, please give small businesses a carve out or a longer ramp to get in compliance, because large companies usually can survive these and small companies can't. I'm also literally, pleading is the right word with the administration. Please be more predictable. The on-off is terrible. Businesses can deal with a lot. They can't deal with unpredictability. And so my main voices on this are watching out for small business and predictability. It's not the tool I would use. I will say President Trump did campaign on tariffs. He did tariffs in Trump #1. We really shouldn't be surprised with him. That doesn't mean that I or we have to like him. But it's very clear to me that this is what he is part of the Trump administration. And we need to, it's not that we need to, we are going to see where this goes because they're in. Okay, Ukraine. I mentioned this just a little bit. Let me just, if it's not absolutely clear, I want to be really clear where I stand on Ukraine and Russia and what you can expect from me and what I have done. I mentioned I spoke out on the UN resolution. From the beginning, it's been clear to me that it would be a huge mistake for Russia to claim any kind of victory. If we allow a dictator to invade a free democracy, and I get it, it's not like Ukraine didn't have problems and doesn't have problems. I'm not at all saying that. But fledgling democracy invaded by a dictator cannot be tolerated. And I think very strongly a couple of things that people like Xi in China is watching. I think this impacts what he does with Taiwan. I think the rest of the world is watching. I know we made commitments to Ukraine, particularly when they abandoned their nuclear weapons. So I have been a strong proponent of supporting Ukraine. I've spoken out. I was one of the few Republicans that spoke out after the meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump in his office. I do believe that some of the criticism is warranted in the sense that Americans deserve to know exactly how their dollars are used that go over there. And if we don't have that accounting, I think that's a fair request. I also understand the frustration that we seem to be fighting this war to a tie, and the United States is, I think, complicit in that. I think it'd have been very different if we had everything that we offered Ukraine, we had done right up front and not just doled it out over a period of time. I think that's a fair criticism. So in short, I don't think there's not mistakes that haven't been made in this. But my hope and desire is that Putin does not get any kind of victory out of this, that we protect our democracy friends. And quite frankly, I get the call for NATO to step up and do more. I think that's fair, but I'm also in the camp that NATO is a very, very important alliance of the United States, and one that we want to foster, while, of course, demanding accountability from our friends over in Europe. Okay, I'm going to jump into kind of a gnarly one, and looking at my time, I'll have to be a little bit careful here because we take a lot of time on. Let me. The cherry blossoms are out here in Washington, and with that, hay fever. And I was not good in taking my medication, and so I've got a little raspy throat. So you'll see me drink a little bit of water. Okay, I know this one is causing tons of stress. And it feels like no matter what people say, so for instance, President Trump has said no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security, that people are uneasy. And I understand that. And this is going to tie in, we're going to maybe lump these two categories together, which is just over DOGE and the Medicare cuts. It's kind of hard to separate all of those. So let me try to tackle both of them together in the 8 minutes that we have left here before we transition. We are spending $2 trillion more per year than we're bringing in revenue. That concerns everybody. I think like we can all feel concerned about that. It's what we do about it that I think where we get differences of opinion. Now for a minute, imagine a pie, which is our spending in the United States. And 2/3 of that pie is what we call entitlements. I know that word doesn't always fit exactly, but just indulge me with that word. And I'm going to say Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are that 2/3. And also, once again, I know that's not the complete story, but for simplification, 2/3 of that budget, we're saying Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, don't touch it. And then the remaining third of the pie, half of that is defense. And so if we say, well, we're not going to cut defense, what you now have is a half of a third of the pie left. That is represents approximately $3 trillion of spending. And if we say that's all we're going to touch, we're going to take $2 trillion of that $3 trillion and cut it to balance the budget. We all know that isn't even possible. No matter what, we could fire every single federal employee, and that's not going to happen. And I think that's why the American people feel uneasy when they hear we're not going to touch those other categories, because you all can do math too and see that we have a problem. Now, first of all, let me acknowledge we're not going to close that $2 trillion gap in a year, 2 years, even 3 years, or I don't know how many is realistic, but it's not in the immediate future. It's out there a little bit. But at the same time, if we don't make cuts, then we'll never close that gap. And that gap will grow and grow and grow. And at some point, we don't have a choice anymore about not touching these other benefits or all of the things that we enjoy the federal government doing. It's just simply, it's a bad trajectory. And count me in that camp. And I'm very worried about that. And I think most of you are too. So what do we do about this? Right now, and here again, oversimplification, the House has sent over a proposal that says we want to cut between $1.5 trillion and $2 trillion. Now, to be clear, that's over 10 years. So of the next 10 years, we're expecting a $10 trillion deficit, and the House is saying we want to cut $1.5 to $2 trillion out of that. And they've given instructions to take $880 billion of that from the Committee of Energy and Commerce, which oversees Medicare, Medicaid. And that's where a lot of people are stressing out about, well, what are you going to do when you cut those benefits? I think there's some low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit would be fraud, waste, and abuse. I don't know anybody who's opposed to us going after that. There's a lot of discussion and, quite frankly, a lot of agreement among Republicans here that we should have work requirements. Why do we want somebody 27 years old, perfectly healthy, to not be working for assistance? And by the way, these work requirements have exemptions for parents, single parents with children. It has exemptions for disabilities. It has exemptions for seniors. It has exemptions for students. What we're really targeting is a healthy individual without other liabilities when we're saying work requirements. Now, the question is if you just simply go after that, is there enough money to make the cuts? And this is the answer: we don't know. And what I think is that we need to be more honest about having that conversation. And what kind of cuts would they be, and who do they affect? I just did a little clip of some comments from some of my colleagues to put this in perspective. For instance, Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, said, anything that slashes into benefits for people who are working, I'm not going to be for. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who did support the Affordable Care Act, Republican, signed a letter opposing plans to repeal it. She has emphasized the importance of maintaining healthcare coverage for her constituents: Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski. And I can go through and list not only the president, but quite a few of the Republicans who said, we're not going to let you cut benefits. I think the real question is what are benefits, and who is truly needs a safety net and who doesn't. And to the extent that is causing stress among the system, I get it and I understand. All I can tell you is the president is firm. Don't cut these benefits. Now, the president has indicated he'll go for fraud, waste, and abuse, and I think he'll go for work requirements. For those of you who are worried, I'm not going to tell you don't worry, but I can just tell you the conversation is we have to do this without taking the safety net away from those who truly need it. Now, tied into that are the cuts for that Elon Musk is doing. If you read the headlines out here, Musk is on his way out. I don't know if that's true or not. I can tell you that in my opinion, it got off to a really bad start. At the beginning, Democrats were with us and saying, yep, we want a right-sized government. We want to get rid of any inefficiencies. And because of the negative chainsaw and all of those things, we lost a lot of people on their willingness to look at cuts. And I know from my experience of being the mayor of Provo, we had to make cuts in 2010. We had to cut the budget about 9%. And there's good ways and bad ways to make cuts. I was really proud. We actually increased employee morale through our process. And you do that by informing people. You do that by having compassion. You do that by involving people in the decisions. And those things haven't been done here. So I will just tell you, I'm in the camp that we do have some serious fiscal issues, and that we can do this in a much better way, much more humane way, and one that doesn't kind of scare people and make even employees who aren't losing their job or people who aren't losing their benefits feel like they're going to lose them. Okay, I'm going to pause for a little water. This isn't going to surprise you. I have the survey results here. 52% of you says Doge is your number one. That is by far and away the largest category. Number two, the economy and inflation. Number three, national security. Oh, let's see if I gave you all the percentage. Doge was 52, economy and inflation was 12, national security 9, healthcare 6, public lands 2. Isn't that interesting? Tells you a lot about our times. When I first ran for Congress 7 years ago, healthcare was the number one issue. I think if some of these other things weren't so big and gnarly at the time, healthcare would be high up there as well. And I'm surprised public lands is only 2, because it's obviously a big deal in a lot of parts of our state. Okay, we have just a second. The one thing I didn't touch on was the signal gate. Let me just quickly say, I too am concerned. I am pleased about Roger Wicker and Jack Reed. They're the chair and the ranking member for Armed Services. And they've called for an investigation by the Department of Defense Inspector General. I agree with that. I think America needs answers. I think this should go broader. I think we should ask, how long? Is this a new thing that's been happening? Has the intel community always been doing this? I personally need a better definition of what qualifies as classified and not. So you have the question of, is it just poor judgment, or does it actually cross the line into classified information? And I'll just tell you that I'm happy to ask more questions until Americans get the answers to exactly what happened and if there needs to be accountability there. Okay, darn it, I've used up my time. We're going to switch over to the individual meetings. And remember, it's a little bit of experiment. So thank you for hanging in there with us while we do this. And off we go. And we'll come back and do these again.